all children should get free school meals. The number's 0207 862 2222. Do get your calls in now. Currently, all children in England can get free school meals until the end of year 2, but after that they only qualify if their family gets certain benefits. But from September 2026, all children whose parents are on universal credit will be eligible to receive a free hot lunch at school. But I wonder whether you think this simply doesn't go far enough, or maybe you wonder if the country can afford to expand that benefit right now. Why don't we punch in with you, Darryl, on this one?
I think in theory it's a good idea, and I sort of like the principle of, we invest in our young people, invest in our children in their early years. What feels perhaps like a handout is an investment we all get a return on, right? Because we have a healthy, nutritious younger population who apply themselves at school, who become better people, who sort of march into the world in better health. I think then that knocks up against the economic reality, which is that there's not a huge amount of money swirling around in education. I'm facing this at the moment. I'm about to put Molly through nursery, and the cost of it is extortionate. And I'm sort of grappling with the fact that we're getting these 30 free hours from the government, but then the cost of the snacks and the cost of the extras and the trips. And I'm talking to the nursery providers who are telling me that they are absolutely up against it. They are so up against it in terms of what they're trying to provide for what they get. And the same goes for schools. Schools are in a very similar situation. I think there might be a good in between, which maybe we can raise the threshold at which people get free school meals to bring more people in. Money doesn't go as far as it used to. What was once a good wage is no longer a good wage, and so that makes sense. I wonder if something like lifting the 2-child benefit cap, which feels like an inevitability, it feels like things are pushed in that direction, might be a better way. Maybe there's a better way to achieve what we want to achieve through this.
I mean, the thing that we don't want is what used to happen, Melinda, where the children getting free school lunches were sort of singled out and had to stand in the free school lunch row. Was that you?
Yeah, that was me. I had free school meals and was the free school meal child that was singled out. So I have to say, at the time, it didn't bother me because, I went straight to the front of the queue and got my hot dog and chips. I was very happy. And the dinner ladies were really kind. But that said, yeah, there can be a real stigma attached to that because, it's indicative, isn't it, that that your family might be struggling in many different ways. And I actually think in an ideal world, absolutely all children would have access to, free school meals, really good, healthy, nutritious food. I definitely think it makes sense to make this available to everybody that's are on universal credit or claiming benefits, because obviously there is a struggle in income there. And it's massive stuff to provide a meal for a child. You're not only that's essential for a child that can't take care of itself, but you're also helping take care of the rest of the family that are under a huge amount of pressure. And economically, we've been in a real crisis lately.
I mean, one of my daughters started off as a primary school teacher, Michelle, and there was no question at all that some children arrived at school, little tiny ones, it's heartbreaking. Yeah. And they hadn't had breakfast, and you weren't really sure if they'd had dinner, and you weren't sure what they'd had, And lots of teachers make it their business, often using their own money, that the first thing they do in the morning is give all the children a bowl of porridge. These are the ones who are onto the breakfast club. And so, one of the things I remember my daughter telling me is you can't really expect them to concentrate. You can't really teach the 3 R's if they're hungry.
Yeah. I kind of see it like, I've seen it in schools. My kids go to state school, and my son's about to leave primary school, so he's in year 6. And I feel like the narrative's changed. I don't feel like kids would be picked on or get us picked on when it comes to free meals. I think it's actually something that I've heard the kids boast about. Well, my mum doesn't have to pay for a meal, I get mine free. And then AJ asked me, why doesn't he get his free? So I think that the narrative is changing. I don't think that it's necessarily investing in our future. I think it's a fundamental right that our kids get to eat that can't necessarily afford to eat. I think investing in our future would be putting more money into education, especially, sexual education or drug addiction or alcohol addiction in schools. I'm a big advocate for having that on the plans going forward. But when it comes to basic feeding, we're living in a country where that should be just basic human rights. And by giving it to children who can't necessarily be sent to school with a packed lunch because they're not given at home is something that just has to be happening.
All right, let's go to Dawn. She's on the line in Somerset. Dawn, how do you feel about this? Do you think the net should be spread far wider?
I think it should be equitable across the country. I've been reading a few articles over the last couple of days. My daughter now is 36, so it's not particularly relevant to me anymore. But I think it's something that when you look, and some of the info I've picked up over the last couple of days is that London and Wales primary school children already get free meals. That doesn't seem particularly fair.
I think some children, I'm not sure about Wales, but in London it's certain children at a certain age, and then, as we said at the beginning, it all stops. And no, it isn't fair, but there's lots of inequity all over the country in all sorts of different directions, including medical treatment, free prescriptions. Some places get them, some don't, all that kind of a thing. But Dawn, I suppose some people will be thinking, look, all right, in an ideal world, every family would get a free turkey at Christmas as well. But that's an ideal world, and we're living in a world where money is so tight, we're so incredibly in debt in this country, and there will be people who are perfectly capable of purchasing a meal for their children. So why do they deserve a free one?
I think that's fair, Vanessa, but I suppose when you look at sort of living standards now, it's so tight out there at the moment. And, you know, where you have families where two parents are actually working and they're still struggling financially, I think putting a line across it around benefits particularly isn't perhaps going to meet the needs across the patch, as it were.
Appreciate the call, Dawn. Thank you so much. Let's go to Maria in Portsmouth. How do you feel about this, Maria?
No, because what we could do is give other parents that are on a lower wage a reduced price meal. They get the same meal, but they have to pay a smaller price for it.
So you're saying a sort of sliding scale depending on earnings? Yeah.
Yeah.
And you think that
But they have to then at least pay something.
And you think it would be sort of easy to do that? It wouldn't cost a whole lot of money to try and work out which one's where on the scale, and that one in that group? No.
It'd just take easy. What's your income? What do you get paid each year? And then you take it from there.
Do you remember finding paying for school meals difficult? Was it expensive for you to do so? Was it something you just factored in? How did it work for you?
Well, when my children went to what we call the state school, the normal school, no, it was cheap and reasonable. When they went to private school, because I wanted them to have a bit better education, that's when I was putting myself on that budget level.
Oh, really? Okay. Maria, thank you. And that just shows, you know, the idea that everyone who sends a child to private school is wealthy. Not true, is it? Look at Maria. She sends her children there and then she can't really afford to pay for the lunch because she spent all the money on the fees. Oh, my gosh. I mean, this is a very emotive thing. We all remember, you know, Jamie Oliver, lovely Jamie Oliver, and the turkey Twizzlers, and the parents shoving the burgers and the chips through the school gate saying, no, I don't want my child to eat those healthy courgettes, definitely not. So it's something that gets people very riled, isn't it? Mm.
Yeah, no, it really is. It really is. I remember I grew up, you know, similar to Melinda. You know, I was the free meal kid at school. But there was many free meal kids at school. You know, I grew up on a council estate in Gateshead. You know, that was the way it was. And I remember, you know, the kids as well, you know, when they were little, until they're like 2 or something like that, it was provided. And a nursery is very expensive. But also I chose to send my kids to nursery so I could continue to work. Not a lot of kids get the opportunity to go to nursery. They go straight into primary school as well. So then I wouldn't have had those extortionate costs for nursery and the food as well for the meals. So it's like everybody's situation is different. But when it comes to children not being fed, not going to school with a packed lunch, not being fed at home, absolutely should be given a free school meal.
They're the basic needs, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, if you look at, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we've got to get that foundation in first. And if you haven't got shelter, safety, security, food, then you can't really carry on up that developmental kind of pyramid to the next layer that's important, and these kids, they're not a commodity, are they? It's not, I understand what you're saying about these children will come in and they will be kind of the next layer of society, but they're more than it's way more than that,
That is true, and I think I make that point really because sometimes people need to hear an economic argument for something, don't they? I mean, there is a very obvious moral argument for it, right? And
if they can't find that one,
and I subscribe to that, wholeheartedly. There are some people out there who will say, "Well, hang on a minute," and actually, the best way to sell that to those people is, "Look, we're investing in our country's future." Yeah. And I also think there's another thing about making life affordable as we possibly can for parents. This is slightly different with nursery, but one of the sort of like push and pulls that I'm in at the moment is is the cost of sending Molly to nursery going to be more than me going to work?
Yes.
Am I going to be paying to go to work, which is what that government help is about? And I think we should keep that in our mind too. Is how can we make life easier for parents?
I'll tell you one thing I would like to say about free school meals. I would like to big up enormously all the head teachers who understand how important these meals are and somehow arrange for the children to have them during the summer holidays and during the Christmas holidays when these children really would go without that meal of the day, and they make arrangements somehow because they understand how vital it all is.